Mark, I'm going to signal you, okay?
Yep, you're going to, with a 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Monday night lectures of the Explorers Club. My name is Mark Fowler. I'm the Vice President of Conservation here at the club. And we are very honored to welcome an incredible speaker tonight. We have Charles Bergman, and he is going to be telling us an incredible story about his experience studying all the world's penguins. The book is called, and his lecture is called, Every Penguin in the World. And he went around the world and studied in situ all 18 species of the world's penguins all around the world. Now before I go into the book and further into Charles, I'd like to say a big thank you to everybody who logged in and joined us for Oceans Week last week. We had an incredible Oceans Week. Trust me, it was incredible with wonderful speakers. I'd also like to say whoever missed Oceans Week last week, we will be restreaming the entire week soon in the future. And you can also go to our Facebook and our YouTube channels where it is archived. I'd also like to thank everyone who was involved. For instance, we are going to be announcing the winner of the World Oceans Week Challenge on Kahoot. And the winner of this challenge is Collins Bettis, and we will contact him tonight. He is the winner. Collins, you are the winner. And I want to thank Christine Spitten and Entrepreneurship, who hosted the Kahoot event. We are very excited to thank everyone for joining us. Please enjoy the archived versions of it. And we're going to continue the talking about the oceans and ocean life like penguins. We're going to continue the celebration of life tonight with Charles Bergman. So what I love about Charles, his book, Every Penguin in the World, is one of his strongest beliefs is very close to my heart. If we can't save the most beautiful animals on earth, then what animals are we going to save? You know, penguins are some of the most beautiful animals on earth, just like the big cats, just like, you know, these magnificent, you know, animals that we see. If we can't save them, then how are we going to save all the other life? So it's so important for us to bring light to the beautiful stories and tell inspiring stories that, like the ones Charles is going to tell tonight. He had life-changing experience that got him out into the most remote places on the planet to study penguins. He is a photographer. He's a writer. He's a professor from Northern Pacific Lutheran University in the Pacific Northwest. So we are very excited to host him tonight. And he's been published in Smithsonian. He's been published in National Geographic. And so Charles is I'm very excited to learn about his adventures with penguins. And without further ado, I would like to throw the mic to Charles, and he's going to give us about 45-minute or 30 plus minute presentation, and then we'll ask some questions. If you have questions, just put them in the Facebook questions, and we'll go from there. So Charles, without further ado, welcome, and I can't wait to hear your story.
Thank you, Mark, and welcome to Every Penguin in the World. My quest, along with my wife, Susan Mann, to see all 18 of the world's species of penguins in the wild. And it's just a privilege and an honor to be speaking with you this evening with the Explorers Club. Thank you so much. And just so you know, it's really my students' fault that I have this kind of crazy obsession with penguins. The students, I mean, at Pacific Lutheran University, where I was a professor for 38 really wonderful years. And I might add, I was a professor not of biology, not of wildlife conservation, but are you ready for this? English Renaissance literature. My PhD is in 16th century poetry. So the journey I've taken from Petrarch and sonnets to the world's penguins, from Shakespeare's English kings to king penguins on South Georgia Island, is really quite amazing. And in some ways, the subtext for this talk tonight. And as I say, it's the students' fault that I have this kind of crazy obsession with penguins. For me, penguins began not where you really might expect in Antarctica, but for me, they began on the equator and with an amazing group of students. I was on a study away course that I sponsored with students in Ecuador, and we were reading nature literature on location. And we were on the Galapagos Islands on this particular boat, actually. And we were sailing from the red sand shores of Rabida Island to that iconic location in the Galapagos Islands, Bartolome. I'm sure some of you have been there. Many of you might have been there. And we were hoping to see a colony of penguins there. It's a colony about half a mile north of the equator. It's the only penguins in the wild that are in the northern hemisphere, that are north of the equator. And if we were lucky, I was hoping we would not only find them, but we could swim with them. It's a great place to swim with penguins, by the way. And as we were traveling, cruising on the boat, I was on deck with a group of 4 students, and we were deep in conversation as the island slid by behind us. The Palo Santo trees on the slopes of the volcanoes were in fresh green leaf. The ocean was a deep, gorgeous ocean blue. The sun was low, but already warming the day. And we had been already ashore that morning at sunrise, in fact, and went ashore a couple times every day to have these amazing experiences with such cool animals as flightless flightless cormorants, marine iguanas. And we had wonderful discussions. We've read Darwin on Location, Jonathan Weiner speak of the finch, even Alexander von Humboldt, one of my favorites. And I had terrific discussions. And I'm thinking, does college really get any better than this? And I remember one of my students said, you know, it's just amazing we're here. It's incredible. And I said, it is. And I wonder, could there be any place in the world even more incredible than the Galapagos Islands to have a destination for a college class? And I don't really remember which of the students said it. In my mind, it's like we all said it at exactly the same time in unison. What about, can you guess, Antarctica? Well, that seemed like an impossible dream. And I didn't know it at the time, but I look back on it now and I realize that my penguin journey began in that very instant, that very moment. Because 2 years later, with that very same 4 students and 15 others in the class, we arrived in Antarctica, the Antarctic Peninsula, a beautiful, beautiful dream world and a dream come true. Well, we were the first university in the world, as nearly as I can tell, to offer an undergraduate course where students actually studied on the Antarctic continent. And I have to say, I'm pretty proud of that. And we were the first university in the United States to have students studying at the same time, undergraduates, on all 7 continents. And Susan and I traced our quest to see all 18 species of penguins back to that very moment. And in fact, the book about that project, Every Penguin in the World, was born in that instant too, though I didn't realize it and didn't have the idea for the book until much later. But it was a joy to research, a joy to write, a joy to photograph. And all the photographs, by the way, in this talk and in the book, I took. And I just feel like I owe a deep debt of gratitude to my students for the inspiration they provided me. And I'm delighted really to be able to share some of this journey, some of the stories from this journey with you in the Explorers Club tonight. Really wonderful organization. I just love it so much. And penguins will call you to great adventures. And if you answer that call, well, they'll change your life. And I know that because they changed mine for sure. I haven't been the same since I got the penguin bug. And I learned a lot from penguins over the years. And I want to share 3 messages from penguins, 3 lessons really that they left with me that I want to share tonight. And the first will be really one that I think is close to the heart of people in the Explorers Club, to be more adventurous, to answer that call to adventure, whatever that means to you. And the second, really the critical one right now in the current state of the world, to know more about the world, and especially how we inhabit it. Because with the planet in peril the way it is, there probably is no message, no lesson more important than that one. And finally, to find some quest for meaning, some quest for the sacred and transformative. The 2 penguins in this photo are king penguins. This photo was taken in the Falkland Islands, Volunteer Point, and they're in a late stage of courtship. And this is really a penguin embrace, a penguin hug. And in many ways, it's an image of penguin love. And the photograph gets to the heart of what penguins have come to mean to me. Penguins are living lessons in a deepening love for the planet and its creatures in all their beauty and all their vulnerability. So let's start with the first lesson then. To be more adventurous, to answer the call to adventure. And here's a cute little Adelie penguin, flippers out as if welcoming us to its world. In the world of penguins, it's almost by definition a world of adventure. When we think of penguins, we think of faraway, remote islands, distant seas with stormy waters, and cold, cold ice. Lots of ice and lots of cold. And that's really a formula for adventure. Adventure is how we really express the urge we all feel to make some deeper contact with the world outside of us, or to make some deeper contact with the wild inside of us. Adventure happens in that space between our comfort zone and what anthropologists call the contact zone with the other. And in that space, change happens, new realities emerge, and we're transformed. So penguins can take us to that spot. And here's one of the first places they took Susan and me. You'll maybe want to buckle up for this adventure. It's pretty exciting. We've been sitting, Susan and I, in a temperate rainforest on the South Island of New Zealand for over 3 hours in a pouring rain. At first, we were photographing the rare and really very endangered Fiordland crested penguin. But the rain started getting so hard that I just packed up the camera gear and we huddled under my little umbrella and waited for our guide, Jerry, to return to lead us out of there. And that left us with the penguins, just us and the penguins. They scrambled out of the sea, out of the surf, hopped up over these dark rocks and made their way into the forest. They're the only penguin in the world that nests in a forest. And they do nest in trees, but obviously they don't nest up in the canopy and they don't nest on branches, they can't fly, but they nest in the trunks, hollowed out trunks and in root systems. And our guide had put us in this wonderful spot as the penguins came by us so we could be within just a few feet of them. And these are really hard penguins to see close up. They're scattered and not well studied. And so this was just an amazing moment for us. They were just a few feet away. And the Fiordland crested penguin has a beautiful straw-colored crest that begins right at the base of his beak, this robust orange beak, pink feet, which are sort of sweet, that even in the rain reflect pink off their bellies. And we were so close that we could actually see the several stripes, often 3, but sometimes more or less, the stripes on their cheeks. You only see those if you're very close and they're comfortable and relaxed. And they reminded me vaguely of tattooed cheeks, tattooed faces. And the Maori name for the Fiordland crested penguin is the Tawaki. It's named after the god of lightning and thunder and rain. These are the penguins of the rain. And they're one of 7 species of penguins that have crests and are called the crested penguins. They're among the most popular of the penguins. And they include such favorites as the macaroni penguin with that funky orange flop of feathers like a pompadour on its head, or the sweet-faced, ruby red-eyed rockhopper penguins, which I just adore. And then really one of my very favorites, the erect crested penguin, much less known than the others, found only on the Bounties and the Antipodes Islands, 500 miles east of New Zealand in the stormy seas, just a set of rocks in the sea. The erect crested penguin is the only penguin in the world that can lift and lower its crest. It's the only penguin that has control of its crest. And then by way of example, I include also this Snares penguin here. Again, limited to just the set of islands in the Snares little archipelago of islands south of New Zealand. Very closely related to the Fiordland penguin, but you might notice they don't have the stripes on their cheeks. And that means they're snares. The stripes means it's Fjordland, no stripes, it's snares. And we were so deeply involved with penguins while we were sitting in that rainstorm that we didn't even hear Jerry, our guide, when he came up behind us. And it was raining so hard, we could hardly hear him when he talked. We got a big problem, he said, and those were the first words out of his mouth. It's nearly impossible for us to get out of here. Those are kind of chilling words. Jerry owns the lodge at Lake Meraki on the South Island near the New Zealand fjords. And that lodge offers this special guided visit down to this secret penguin beach. And Jerry's been doing it for 30 years. And in all that time, he said, never has he seen the river we've got to go back over and through as deep, as fast, and as dangerous as it looked now. We walked over to the bank of the river. It came out of the forest, cut across the sandy, rocky beach, and emptied into the ocean. When we'd come in the morning, it had been shallow, barely over our ankles. We just skipped across it without a problem. But it had been raining all day long, and it had actually been raining for several days. We just hadn't managed to get down in a little respite. And now, as we stood beside it, it was several feet deep. It looked violent and swift as it crashed and broke over rocks. And it was really actually a little bit scary. And the only way to get out was that we had to walk through it. Jerry gave us instructions. We're going to lock our arms, he said, elbow to elbow and form a human chain when we go across. Jerry was upriver, Susan was in the middle, and I was downriver. When we step in, he said, keep your feet on the bottom. Shuffle your feet. Don't lift them off the bottom. The rocks in the water will be slippery, and there's sand that will be uneven. Whatever you do, keep your feet on the bottom. And most important of all, he said, do not fall down. The current is so strong, we could easily get swept out into the Tasman Sea. And he added rather ominously, and by the way, next stop, Tasmania. Well, Susan and I just basically looked at each other. We didn't say a word. One of the things I've always admired about her is when things are tough, she just does what's got to be done. We stepped in the river. Even at the bank, it was up to my thighs. And by the way, I had about a 40-pound camera pack on my back, and we had about 30 feet to go to get across this river. We shuffled in toward the center. The current was really strong, and by the time we were about halfway across, the river was already over my hips. I could feel my feet sliding out from under me, and I was top heavy. I screamed at Jerry, I feel like I'm falling down. I may go under. And he screamed at me, don't fall down, get on your feet, which is like really good advice and in all practical sense, kind of worthless because it's like telling a pitcher who's wild, throw strikes. Well, we're crying out loud. I would get to my feet. The pitcher would throw strikes if we could. And I went under. I went down and I went all the way under. And I show this video of penguins crashing in the surf up against rocks because this is what it felt like underwater. I don't know how long I went down. I don't know how far I traveled. I'm not even sure how deep the water got. I must have banged across the bottom on the river, over the rocks and against the rocks. And when I finally came up, I really had no idea where I was. All I knew is that Susan was screaming at me because I guess I had pulled her down with me. Let go of me, she was screaming. And I'm like, no, you'll get swept into the Tasman Sea. I'll never see you again, really, literally. And I don't really know how it happened and how we got there exactly, except that the current must have shoved us across the river and into a sandbank sticking out into the water because we were on our hands and knees, completely disoriented and entangled. And Jerry was already out of the river, and he plucked us each one at a time out of the river. And we just stood there, soaked, kind of shaken, looking down at that water and just feeling extremely lucky to have gotten out of there alive. And one of the things that has also happened to me when I've had these kind of near-death experiences, that you get this surge of adrenaline, everything gets really super clear. And I can tell you at that moment, I was just sort of feeling like, wow, chasing penguins must be one of the most exhilarating, miserable ways in the world of having some of the best times of your life. Well, we kind of gathered ourselves and hiked up the hill. We had still to get through the forest, this rainforest, big tree ferns and stuff up the way. Jerry just blazed a trail right up the path. He said he wasn't going to bother with right up the hillside. He wasn't going to bother with the path because we didn't want to cross the river more than we had to. That was fine with me because it meant we actually passed by several penguins sitting at the base of their, sitting out in front of their actual burrows by tree trunks. They reminded me, I have to say, of hobbits guarding the entrances to Middle Earth. We crossed the river a couple more times. It was really deep up higher, but not wide and not fast. It was up to our chests, actually. So it just was a matter of wet. And since we were already soaked, it didn't matter. And then when we got to the lodge, I realized that I had this enormous, really huge bruise that went from above my knee, up my thigh, across my bum, and into my lower back. It was black and purple and kind of a nauseating shade of green. And it didn't go away for several days. So a couple of days later, we decided I'd better see a doctor. And she just gasped when she saw it. She said she'd never seen a bruise, anything like that before. Where did you get that? She said. And I don't know why, just at the spur of the moment, I blamed the penguins. I said, the penguins tattooed my bum. And then I thought about it, and the penguins with their tattooed cheeks. And you'll forgive me, but I had a tattooed cheek as well, different kind of cheek, of course, but nevertheless. And it felt like the mark of a penguin. It felt like my own badge of belonging. It was really the sign of a kind of increasing identification with the penguin world. And that river was, for me, the space between my comfort zone and contact with the other, with penguins. And it was also the most unforgettable entrance into the world of adventure, in the world of penguins in my life. So that's really the first lesson, the really exhilarating one, to answer the call to adventure, whatever that means to you. And the second lesson is to know more about the world, and especially our place in it. And to do that, let's take a look first at a map of the world as it might look to penguins. Our maps of the world usually have Antarctica at the bottom. It's not very realistic. It's sort of a vague kind of line across the bottom of the map with a single finger pointing up for the Antarctic Peninsula. It's often left out. It usually feels like an afterthought. But for penguins, Antarctica is the center of the world, a new way of looking at the world. And I'd like to show you from this map 2 facts about penguins and 2 misconceptions about penguins. And the first fact is that Antarctica is at the bottom of the world, of course, and it is completely surrounded by an ocean, the Southern Ocean. And it is the only circumglobal ocean in the world. And because it's completely surrounded like that, Antarctica is basically isolated from the rest of the world. And in fact, it's in that isolation that penguins evolve. And the second point to point out is that there are all these little archipelagos in that ocean, sub-Antarctic islands, little groups of islands. And there are lots of penguins on those islands. And in fact, several of those islands have just one species of penguin, or it's the only place you can find a particular species of penguin. For example, if you look at the top of this map, Tristan da Cunha and Gough Island. That's a little archipelago, maybe almost halfway between Cape Town and Rio de Janeiro. Maybe the most remote island chain in the world, the most remote inhabited island chain in the world. And it's where we had to go for penguin species number 18, which for us was the northern rockhopper. 95% of the northern rockhoppers occur here. The other 5% are in the Indian Ocean, even more remote. Or if you go down to the bottom of this map and look at New Zealand, to the left, you'll see the Bounties and the Antipodes, where we had seen that photo of the erect crested penguin. Only place to find it. Or Snares Island, just off the southern tip of New Zealand. Only place to find Snares penguins. Or Macquarie Island, halfway between Australia and Antarctica. The only place to find the royal penguin. So the Southern Ocean and the archipelagos. And then, so the misconceptions are that all penguins are really about Antarctica and about ice. They're not really about Antarctica. In fact, most of them are on these little islands, and some of them are on the continents. And, well, ice, no, we've already seen the Fiordland crested penguins in rainforests. The Humboldt penguin is in a desert. The African penguin, there is an African penguin. I mean, just the fact of that is its own kind of amazing thing. Why know more about the planet? Know more about the world itself? Well, there are currently about 27,000 species in imminent danger of extinction in the world, according to the IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. That's 28% of all assessed species in the world. That's really just because we're just not paying attention. We're not taking this seriously enough. It's not like we don't know what's going on, but we're not taking it seriously, and we don't pay enough attention. And so Susan and I think it's never too late to learn. It's never too late to do something positive. So for one of our wedding anniversaries, we decided we would volunteer on a project that is trying to study and save the African penguin. And to do that, we spent almost 2 weeks on Robben Island. And the African penguin is one of the most endangered species of birds in the world. Robben Island is located in the middle of Table Bay. You can see Cape Town across the way from here. This photo is taken from Robben Island. And that's Cape Town with Table Mountain above it. And I'm sure many of you, some of you at least, certainly have been to Robben Island. It's really just a low-lying hump of sand and rock in the middle of that gorgeous bay. And if you came, you probably did not come for penguins. You may not even have noticed them while you're on the island. It's likely that you came to see the prison on Robben Island, this gray, bleak, dominating building on the island, which is where 1,500 political prisoners were housed for almost 2 to 3 decades in the last century for the crime of opposing apartheid. And one of the great heroes of the 20th century, Nelson Mandela, as you probably know, spent 18 years on Robben Island as a prisoner. And it is one of the great unremarked ironies of modern environmental history that this island, which was once the symbol of racism and repression, is now a World Heritage Site and a national monument. And it offers de facto sanctuary to Africa's only species of penguin and to the last significant colony of these penguins in the continent. Our favorite day was when we helped Richard Shirley weigh and measure baby penguins. Richard is the director of the program to study and save the penguins on Robben Island. And to begin the day, he took us to a nest directly across from the front gate of the prison, which is right behind him, right across the road. Amazing. He disappeared into a thorn bush, came out in a couple minutes, and he had this little baby penguin, absolutely adorable, plushy. squishy, that brown down feathers, and that white belly, and this cute, sweet, irresistible face. And Richard handed it to Susan, who was just sort of beside herself with having it. Oh, it's unbelievably cute, she said. But then she went on, but it's not cuddly, it's not soft, really. It's really strong and muscular and squirmy. It's more like holding a wired up Jack Russell Terrier than a plushy little stuffed animal. And we quickly learned that every penguin, if you're going to work with them, you better be prepared, has 4 weapons. And the first is their claws. They'll try to scratch you. And that's really dangerous because they walk around in their own poo all day, and it's a good way to get infections. Their beak, well, they'll try to bite you, and they can really clamp down. It's really strong. And their flippers, their wings, don't look like much. They look little and kind of adventitious. But in fact, they're really strong, and they can slap you really hard with them. But my favorite, you'll forgive me, is their bum, their 4th weapon. They'll aim at you with their bum and try to shoot you with a stream of stinky, fishy poo. They're actually quite good at this. They can shoot up to 4 feet of projectile poo. And everybody, if you work long enough, sooner or later gets hit. Well, African penguins are one of a group of 4 species of penguins, the Spheniscus penguins. It's a term that means diving penguins. It includes the African penguin, the Magellanic penguin in Patagonia, the Humboldt penguin in Chile and Peru, and the Galapagos penguin. These penguins are not among the most beautiful of the penguins, I think. They don't have the air of regality that emperor penguins and king penguins have. They're not the aristocracy. They don't even have the kind of bling, the golden bling of the crested penguins. But I guess it makes sense for what would you expect for inhabitants of a prison island? They have stripes, black and white stripes. I know, but anyway, I think of them as the proletariats of the penguin world because they're so hardworking. Every day they come marching down to the sea, spend the day fishing and swimming and trying to catch fish, and at the end of the day, march back up into the island to their nests to feed their families. They're so hardworking. And you can hear them braying, by the way. They used to be called jackass penguins because they have this bray, and you can hear it as the evening comes and their mates are calling the penguins back from the sea. And while we were working with the penguin, Richard said, it's really sad, but unless something serious changes, really changes, these penguins are on the way out. They could easily be extinct, he said, by 2050. It's shocking to hear him say that. But these penguins have been on a deep dive of a different sort for all of the last century. In the 1930s, African penguins numbered about 1,500,000 penguins, nesting mostly on offshore islands from Namibia to the Eastern Cape. Now, after a century of loss, this penguin species is down some 95%, and it's still decreasing. The cause for the decline is a familiar litany of neglect, exploitation, and even abuse, really. Their eggs were collected for food. Guano from the islands they nest on was gathered for fertilizer, and that just took away the soft soil for them to build nests, burrowed nests in. They're temperate species penguins, the Spheniscus penguins, which means they often occur near people, as in African penguins in the very busy shipping lanes off the Cape of Good Hope. And that's been a problem for them. Oil spills, discharges from ships, toxic waters, trash. It's been really, really a serious problem for African penguins, but probably the worst of these kinds of problems has been the conflict they have with human industrial fishing. But there's old-fashioned kind of environmental problems that almost manageable in comparison with the current emerging problem of global climate change, which is warming the oceans, as you must have learned last week, the Oceans Week, and changing ocean currents. And for penguins, that's a real problem. Bengala current comes up from the southern seas, cold water that comes up and brushes the southern tip of Africa. And that has made it possible for penguins to survive and thrive. But now with the climate change, that current has changed some 200 miles to the south and east, taking with it the epicenter of the fish that penguins want, sardines and anchovies. It means the penguins are working harder every day to get food and bring it back. It means that increasingly the colony is undernourished. And almost every day that we were on the island, we had to intervene and do emergency triage to get liquids and vitamins and minerals into the penguins, adults and babies, and then send them to a rehabilitation center in Cape Town. Bee Boersma is one of the world's leading penguin biologists. She's at the University of Washington. She says penguins are marine sentinels that tell us the health of the planet, of the oceans and the planet. Well, penguins are not really doing that well. Of the 18 species of penguins, 10 are in danger of extinction, and 4 more are near threatened with extinction. That's by the classifications from the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. Over half are already threatened, and another 4 are on the way. And if something doesn't change, that means that basically they're soon going to be threatened with extinction as well. Well, we love penguins. They may be the most popular bird in the world, the most beloved bird in the world. And we love them, I think, in part because they're so unlikely, so improbable. They just violate all sorts of kind of logical categories. They're a bird, but they don't fly. They're the only seabird in the world that doesn't fly. They have wings, but they've turned into flippers. And in fact, they walk upright, and when those flippers look like arms, they remind us of ourselves. They look like little versions of us, wobbly, cute, unsteady, irresistible. Well, I really don't think if we hadn't seen penguins, we would imagine them. But I'll tell you, even more unimaginable to me is a world without penguins. Nelson Mandela himself loved penguins, and he wrote about them in his book, A Long Walk to Freedom. He said that he and the other prisoners were assigned to work on the beaches gathering seaweed, which was then sold into Asia. And they used to enjoy watching the penguins as they came down to the sea and walked back from the sea on their daily rounds, wobbly, unsteady, cute. And Mandela said they reminded him of a brigade of flat-footed, uncertain soldiers. And he said they laughed at the penguins, they laughed at them, and they took pleasure out of them. That penguins gave them humor and consoled them in the darkest days of their imprisonment on that island. While we were finishing up with that little chick, Susan said, you know, this is our 10th species of penguin. And I said to her, I know, 10 species. And this is our 10th wedding anniversary, that very day, which was June 10th. And there was something about that moment that was just so compelling. We decided right then and there, we were going to try to see the other 8 species we hadn't seen. We were going to try to see all 18. We had thought about it, considered it a lot, but actually we're resisting the idea of trying to see all of them because we knew how difficult it would be. You saw how remote some of those islands are, how far away, how hard to get to, how even dangerous to get to in some cases. But in that moment, we just decided we were going to do it. And in large part because we wanted to do our part to share the conservation story of penguins, what's happening with them, one of the world's most beloved group of birds. Because if we can't save penguins, if we can't save what everybody loves, what in the world can we save? So in both epic and intimate terms, penguins are folded into the fabric of all our lives. We may not know it, they seem far away, but what we do matters. It affects them, the fish we eat, our ecological footprint. And whether it's in the grand sweep of a nation with a new history being reborn through new heroes like Nelson Mandela, or in the private dedications of a married couple like Susan and me, who simply want to try to make a difference. Penguins entertain us. Penguins console us. Penguins inspire us, and they fire our imaginations. And penguins teach us so much about the world. So the African penguin is really a great example of the need to conserve penguins. And at first, really, our journeys to see penguins were independent excursions, really. We would just find a neat place we wanted to go, or a cool animal, cool species of penguin we wanted to see. Like these Gentoo penguins in the Falkland Islands under an unforgettable sunset. It was an amazing set of experiences, but over time we began to realize that these journeys taken together were taking on the contours of something that really we could only call something like a spiritual journey. This professor of English began thinking of himself as a pilgrim of penguins, as unlikely as that seems. And that we were on a quest for something really sacred and transformative. A pilgrimage is an external journey undertaken to invoke a corresponding internal journey. It is, by definition, a journey of hope. Hope to be healed, hope to be whole, in some cases, a hope to be forgiven. Perhaps always a hope for some kind of deeper encounter with who we are, and always a hope to be changed. I found myself wanting to see more deeply into things. I wanted to see more fully into the mystery of things. I wanted to see with the eyes of the heart. And if you're looking for a journey of hope and you're looking for a sense of mystery, there's no better place to begin than with penguins, and especially emperor penguins. They are living mysteries. Just consider some of the astonishing, almost incomprehensible facts of their lives. They are the tallest penguin in the world, 3.5 to 4 feet tall. They're really big. They're gorgeous. They may be the most beautiful of the penguins, depending on your taste. They are iconic, really. And they are the only penguin that is so completely associated with Antarctica as it is. When the winter comes, the most ferocious winters on the planet, the emperor penguin doesn't leave. All the other birds leave the continent, but the emperor penguin stays, and on the sea ice off the continent forms colonies. And it's just unbelievable that it does this with temperatures minus 50 to 60 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. Almost constant storms with winds frequently over 100 miles an hour, total darkness, and basically exposed, hardly any cover. In these circumstances, trying to understand, in the most hostile environment in the world, That's when they have their babies and they don't have a nest to put them in. The female will lay a single egg and transfer it in the most delicate operation of her life into the feet of the mate, who cradles it up, tucks it under a flap of skin, covers it with feathers. And then she leaves. She goes off back to the sea to feed so she can be fattened up to help when the chick hatches. And she leaves the male then in charge of incubating and hatching the chick. Now think about this. Unbelievable cold, ferocious winds, total darkness. The male has to stand for 9 weeks. He can't lie down because he can't lose control of that egg. And he won't eat a thing. He'll lose 40% of his body weight in those 9 weeks. I adore science. I love science. And there is no amount of scientific explanation that can exhaust the awe that these birds inspire. Honestly, I found myself wanting to be in their company. I wanted to be in the presence of these birds. I wanted these penguins to stir in me a sense of awakened wonder. There are maybe 45, 50 colonies of emperor penguins around the continent of Antarctica. Maybe 500,000, 600,000 birds. This is one of the species that is declining and starting to decline fast. The most northerly colony of these penguins is in Snow Hill Island, on the east side of the Antarctic Peninsula in the Weddell Sea. It's an island that Shackleton refers to in his doomed voyage of the Endurance. In their first portion of their voyage, after the Endurance is crushed and sunk, they hope to take their open boats to Snow Hill, but they slide right by it. Susan and I felt increasingly that we just had to see a colony of emperor penguins, that our quest wouldn't be complete without it. And we chose Snow Hill. And that became a kind of holy grail. And so we boarded a plane in Seattle, flew to Buenos Aires, took another plane from Buenos Aires to Ushuaia and Tierra del Fuego at the southern tip of South America. And there we boarded the Russian icebreaker, the Kapitan Plevnikov. And in this, we crossed 600 miles of the Drake Passage, stormiest seas in the world, navigated through the ice-choked Antarctic Sound, reached the Weddell Sea, turned south, and crashed our way towards Snow Hill Island. Every voyage to see an emperor penguin colony is its own kind of crazy. I can tell you that from experience. Crossing the Drake Passage is always an adventure, frequently exhilarating, sometimes scary, on occasion downright dangerous. It will always, no matter what conditions, give you occasion when you cross the Drake to contemplate your own mortality. We were given abundant opportunities to contemplate ours in our crossing. It normally takes about 40 hours to cross the Drake Passage. It took us 72. We were in storms the entire way. 25-foot waves smashed into the ship on the starboard side. Winds over 70 miles per hour. The ship rocked and rolled. And I actually watched several people get launched and actually go airborne in the storm. Sensible people retreated to their cabins and rode out the storm in their bunks. I decided to go up to that top deck of this ship, 10 decks up, the bridge where the captain was, because I wanted to just feel the Drake Passage in all its wildness. I wanted an experience of pure wildness. So I went and I got into that little overhang that you can see. It's like it's hanging off over the ocean. And this is what it was like. With each wave, the ship would roll 30 to 35 degrees toward the sea. And then it would roll the other way, another 30 to 35 degrees. It's worth contemplating these big waves. 35 degrees, that's almost halfway. It was unbelievable as I sat in that overhang. watch the ocean come rising up to me, and then 25-foot waves, making it look even closer. And you can't help but wonder, at what point does a ship, even this big a ship, actually just go right over? Well, the captain, this is a picture of the captain, didn't seem to mind. You can see the gauge. It was exhilarating, a kind of wild, almost idiot's rush, but it was as close to pure wildness that I've come. And obviously, looking for penguins is not really necessarily for the faint of heart. But when we got to the Weddell Sea, the icebreaker came into its own. It's a common misconception that icebreakers plow through the ice, which is not really what happens. It's certainly not ours. Ours slides up on top of the ice and then would come smashing down on top of it. And we could actually stand in the bow and watch this happen and watch the ice break beneath the ship, and cracks would shoot out from the front of the boat like bolts of jagged lightning. It was amazing. And our goal in this icebreaker was to get within 10 miles of Snow Hill Island. And there are a lot of ways these voyages, these expeditions can fail. The ice can be too thick and you can't get close enough to the island. There can be heavy fog, heavy winds, whiteout blizzards. And any one of those, and well, you're not going to see penguins. And you only have a limited number of days down there. And I've talked to lots of people who went all that way only to be frustrated because there are no guarantees. And what all those conditions share is they mean that the helicopters cannot fly, because what would happen is the helicopters would lift us off the ship and drop us on the ice. And we were just incredibly lucky. We got to this Snow Hill Island. We were within 6 miles of the colony. The weather improved. And we had sun every day with a thin veil of clouds that actually was great because it filtered the light, softened it for photography. And every morning, the helicopters, 2 of them, would drop us off at a little base camp on the sea ice. And from there, we would walk about 1.5 miles to 2 miles to the Emperor Penguin colony up there in the gray snow. And this was all to kind of minimize the impact we might have, the disturbance we might have on the colony. And you can see Snow Hill Island a couple of miles off in the distance. We're out on sea ice. We had 3 days and 12 glorious hours per day on the ice with the penguin. Really, you couldn't get luckier. And it was one of the most amazing wildlife experiences like no other I've ever had. In fact, the penguins would come right up to us. I think maybe because, well, we were wearing the same colors they had on, and I couldn't help but wonder if they thought maybe we were strange, mutant, gigantic penguins. The adults are just exquisitely beautiful. So subtle, so nuanced, so shaded in their beauty. It just struck me as so in contrast to the harshness of their environment. That sunburst of orange in their ear patch and that white wash, and the golden wash of sunshine on their chest. And they're very closely related to king penguins. They're in the same genus, Aptenodytes. The emperors are bigger by about 6 inches. And the emperors nest in Antarctica or breed in Antarctica. The kings in the subantarctic islands. I'll leave it to you to decide which of these 2 you think is the more beautiful. Obviously, you can't go wrong. What I really didn't expect was the effect of the chicks. Of course, I should have realized, I guess. The colony is all about the chicks. And they completely steal the show. I knew they'd be cute. I'd seen photos, but nothing can prepare you for how cute they are in person. They have these plush gray down bodies, this black cap that reminds me of the Anglo-Saxon helmet, big black eyes set in, white face and white chins, curious, inquisitive, full of personality. They look like they're wearing pajamas, don't they? They look like a little baby in pajamas. And I swear they are, I think, arguably the cutest animal babies in the world. They're full of personality. They're very social. You can see that here. Each one of these little chicks is sort of looking at me, curious as can be. They're gathering these creches. They're called creches or nurseries. Their parents both have to go off and hunt for fish for them when they get to a certain size. They're big appetites. And so the chicks form these creches or nurseries, little groups. And I love them. They're just amazing. And they wander all over the colony, hither and yon. This gives you an example of the formation of a colony. These are little chicks. They're so big bottomed and their flippers are too big and they don't know what to do with them. So they look really awkward. And here comes an adult, and the adult's kind of futile task is to keep these chicks in order. The chicks get excited. You can see them bobbing their heads and chirping, typical, and that flapping, that flippers. And that's the adult sound. And watch, it's going to try to get that one chick that's not quite the way it should be in the creche back into position. And there it is. And for just a second, they're in this perfect creche. The emperor penguin has done its job. The babysitter discharged duty, and it lasts just that long, and they're off on their next adventure. You gotta love it. Well, I spent one whole afternoon watching a particular chick. It had actually come right up to me as I was sitting on the ice. It introduced itself really within a foot. It just looked at me, took a step. I thought it was going to leap into my lap, but instead it slipped on the ice and did a face plant. And that's penguins for you. Cute, curious, and comical all at the same time. But what interested me about this chick was that it was all by itself. And that's unusual. And every time an adult would come back to the colony, it would accost that adult and sort of beg from it. The adults just ignored it, as this one kind of is doing. Sometimes the adults even slapped it because it was kind of annoying. And there was like hours of supplication and hours of rejection. And I thought, these chicks have got to be tough. And it's true, they do, because only 20 to 30% of them will survive the first year. And later in the evening, an adult came up to that chick and gave it one of its call, that hoarse, throaty, kazoo-like call. And the chick got so excited, it popped up, just absolutely upright, threw its head back, started head banging and chirping. And then surprised me, it turned around. It wasn't after food, it backed into that chest of the adult, just sank into the golden pillow of feathers of its parent. And you could see this chick is looking right at me. In its eyes, just a wave of contentment and satisfaction take over its face. It was a parent and chick reunion. And the adult bent forward and inspected its chick. And it was just touching it with its beak, and these tender beaky kisses, so intimate, so delicate, so vulnerable. Again, in the context of this really hostile world, this really savage place. And there are times when what we see in the world and how we feel are just absolutely inseparable. These are often defining images for us. I'm sure you've had the experience. You look at something and you can just feel your heart rise in your chest. It's a wave of love frequently. And I've had it even where it seems like my heart just flies out from my body and connects with the world outside of me. These are often defining moments for us, revelations of value. When a creature aligns itself so perfectly with our feeling that the inner world and the outer world just seem indistinguishable. At times like this, nature seems to be speaking to the deepest part of our unconscious. At times like this, nature shows us how it heals the attentive heart. This feeling, this magical feeling that you get in the company of penguin is like the feeling I've gotten in the company of no other animal. This amazing combination of awe and delight, of admiration and just simple joy. This feeling will change you. This feeling can even save you. And this feeling can certainly show you how nature comes to live inside all of us. Well, Susan and I have a term for this feeling. We call it the penguin glow. And once you feel it, you'll want more. I warn you, it's a bit addictive. It helps explain how I wound up a pilgrim penguin. And you may find yourself on some island someday, maybe looking for species number 10 yourself and wondering if you should go for all 18. That's the power of the penguin glow. So let me just end here. That's it, really. A little penguin with a great big story about love and hope in really daunting times. And a little over a year and a half ago, Susan and I returned to the Galapagos Islands. I actually took a group of alumni from the university, Pacific Lutheran University. And of course, we talked penguins and many other things, but we talked about adventure and conservation and questing for something meaningful. And while I was there, I actually found this penguin sitting on a big rock with waves crashing at the base and casting a spume of ocean mist all around it. It was a late afternoon sun that caught that just perfectly and created, for just a few seconds, a rainbow over this penguin. A penguin embodying the penguin glow. And it was for me the rainbow at the end of my penguin pilgrimage. And yes, penguins are all about diversion and all about consoling us, but they're more than just simple therapy. Rainbows, for example, are all about hope and fresh starts. And maybe as we come out of the pandemic and the really dark times we've been going through, we're ready for something new. And penguins, I really think, could be that new thing we need to save the planet. Because the feeling they evoke in us could just be really a model for what we might feel for the rest of the planet, that love and affection. Penguins could be the change we need. Penguins could be the hope we seek. If we learned the lessons of penguins, it could just be that penguins might save us. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to speak to you.
You're here, Charles. I'd like to say thank you. Oh my gosh. I've never learned or heard so many amazing stories about penguins and someone's dedication to them. I mean, it seems like this has become your life's purpose. And I do respect somebody who, you and your wife, dedicating your lives to being spokespeople for penguins. I mean, we all know how amazing they are, but we don't really hear the personal stories of discovery about them. And obviously you've probably taught hundreds, if not thousands of kids in college or students in college about this experience as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. It's been a pleasure. It really is a pleasure.
Absolutely. And we've got some actual questions. I think we'll probably ask just a couple because we're running a little out of time, but the presentation was so great. I saw one or two that I'll throw out there. Let me see. The one I thought was really interesting was penguins. They all they're presented as you presented them. They seem to all be very different from each other, as they are from the same phylogenetic species. Or are they convergence or multiple genetic branches? Did they all come from one species, or are they sort of convergent?
Well, I think they came from one species. I'm really not the expert to know this for sure, but the most important fossil find was actually from Snow Hill Island, a single ancestor penguin that's 6 feet tall. Wow. Really, really huge. And I think that's the ancestor to all of them.
I would love to run into a 6-foot tall penguin. That
Can you imagine?
it would be pretty amazing. I mean, maybe one will thaw out and come and say hello to us. But no, thank you so much for being a spokesperson and for telling us, the challenges ahead, but also the beauty. Your message is so beautiful about how these represent how we treat the planet. These penguins, they come from the most remote places on Earth, and it's up to us to save those places as well as ourselves. So
yeah,
I want to thank you. I think from the Q&A, I think people have been very engaged. They've asked a lot of questions about the evolution of penguins. So we'll have to get the story to them about the large 6-foot penguin. And we look forward to, I would like to say, please go to the Northwest chapter and get to know some of our members.
I will.
And join the club, because people who have dedicated their lives to wildlife and conservation, that's what, the club is. Exploration, field research, and conservation are our missions. And you've done all of these. So on behalf of everyone, I would really just love to thank everybody and say thanks for joining us tonight. We are honored, and let's all get out there and go to penguin country. Let's go all around, the Southern Hemisphere. And I've seen the South African penguins, and they are so incredible and unique and such incredible personalities. So let's get out there ourselves. I want to once again thank Charles, and thank you everyone for tuning in. And we will see you next week on our Monday lecture series. And Charles, we will look forward to having you join our club and join the Northwest chapter. And thank you, everybody. Tune in next time and check out Oceans Week, and the adventure continues. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much again. I really had a great time. Thank you, Mark.
All right. See you soon. Thank you.